My name is Lily Allen, and if someone had told me a year ago that I would have a near-death experience and return with a message from Jesus, I would have laughed in disbelief. But life has a way of unfolding in unexpected ways. On March 2, 2025, my life changed forever. What started as a normal day quickly spiraled into something that would challenge everything I thought I knew about reality, faith, and the world around me. That afternoon, I was preparing dinner in my kitchen, a simple meal of spaghetti and garlic bread, a family favorite. The day was peaceful, with the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. My husband had left for work, and my children were still at school. Everything felt normal. Until suddenly, it wasn't. A strange heaviness crept into my chest. At first, I dismissed it as heartburn, but then my hands began to tremble. A wave of dizziness hit me like a storm, and my vision blurred. My knees buckled as I reached out for support, gripping the edge of the counter. The world around me began to spin, and my breath became shallow, as if the air itself was slipping away from my grasp. Panic set in. My heart pounded against my ribcage, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. I tried to call for help, but my voice felt trapped within me. The edges of my vision darkened, closing in like a tunnel. The last thing I heard was the sizzle of garlic bread burning in the oven and my phone buzzing on the counter before everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my kitchen anymore. I found myself in a vast, radiant space filled with an indescribable light. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before, pure, golden, and alive, wrapping around me with a warmth that felt like love itself. The air was thick with peace, and I realized I was no longer afraid. Then, I saw him. Standing before me was a figure clothed in brilliant white, his presence both overwhelming and comforting. His eyes, deep and filled with wisdom, held mine with a gaze that penetrated straight into my soul. Though he had not spoken a word, I knew who he was. Jesus. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I dropped to my knees, overwhelmed by the sheer holiness of his presence. I wanted to speak, to ask where I was, to question if I had died, but before I could form the words, he reached out and placed a hand upon my shoulder. The moment his touch met me, waves of warmth and peace flooded through me, filling every fiber of my being with an indescribable sense of love and belonging. Then he spoke. "Lily, you have been called to witness. Your time on earth is not yet done. You must return and share what you have seen. There is a message that must be heard." His voice was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was powerful, yet gentle, resonating deep within me as if it bypassed my ears and went straight to my soul. I wanted to stay. I wanted to remain in this place where there was no pain, no fear, only love. But in my heart, I understood. I had a mission. Before I could respond, the light around me intensified, and I felt myself being pulled away. The next thing I knew, I was gasping for air, my body shaking as I lay on the cold kitchen floor. The smell of burnt garlic bread filled my nostrils, and the distant sound of sirens reached my ears. My phone, which had been buzzing before I lost consciousness, was now on the floor beside me. A call from my husband was still on the screen, unanswered. I was back. But I was no longer the same. From that moment on, I knew I couldn't keep this experience to myself. I had been given a second chance, not just to live, but to share the message I had received. And so, I embarked on a journey to tell the world what I had seen, to remind them that love is real, that faith is not in vain, and that Jesus is watching, calling each of us to something greater. This is my story. And it is only the beginning. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my kitchen anymore. I was above it. I saw my own lifeless body lying motionless on the floor. The smoke alarm was blaring, and my neighbor, Mrs. Taylor, was pounding on the front door. But despite the chaos, I felt no fear, only peace, an indescribable sense of calmness that wrapped around me like a warm embrace. Then, a force I couldn't see began to pull me upward. My kitchen, my home, my body, all of it faded into the distance as I ascended into a vast, luminous space. The light around me wasn't just bright, it was alive. It radiated warmth, intelligence, and familiarity. I knew I wasn't alone. And then I saw him. A figure stood before me, surrounded by an unimaginable glow. At first, I couldn't see his face because the light was so intense, but my soul knew who he was before my eyes could even confirm it. Jesus. His presence was overwhelming, not in a fearful way, but in a way that made me feel completely known and utterly loved. When he spoke my name, it wasn't just sound, it was truth, an undeniable reality that resonated deep within me. His voice carried power, yet it was gentle, filled with a love so profound that I could feel it seeping into every part of my being. As he stepped closer, the radiance surrounding him softened just enough for me to see his face. His eyes, so full of wisdom, compassion, and understanding, met mine, and in that moment, I felt as though he had known me for all eternity. Every fear, every doubt, every struggle I had ever faced was laid bare before him, yet there was no judgment, only love. "Lily," he said, his voice echoing through me, "you are here because I have something to show you." Before I could respond, the space around us shifted. The light, though still present, gave way to a magnificent landscape that stretched infinitely in every direction. It was like nothing I had ever seen before, rolling hills that shimmered with colors beyond human perception, rivers of liquid light flowing like pure energy, and a sky so vast and radiant that it felt alive. It wasn't just beautiful, it was perfect. This, Jesus continued, gesturing to the breathtaking scene before us, is but a glimpse of what awaits those who believe. A deep sense of longing stirred within me. This place, whatever it was, felt more like home than anywhere I had ever been on earth. I wanted to stay. I wanted to remain in this presence, in this peace that surpassed all understanding. But before I could even express my desire, Jesus turned to me with a look of both love and urgency. "You must return," he said. "There is more for you to do." I didn't want to go. My heart ached at the thought of leaving, but in his eyes, I saw purpose. I understood. I had been given this experience not just for myself, but for others. There was a message I needed to carry, a truth I had to share. As he reached out and placed his hand upon my shoulder, I felt myself being pulled backward, the radiant landscape fading as a familiar darkness enveloped me. And then, I gasped for air. I was back. Lying on the cold kitchen floor, my body trembling as the smell of burnt garlic bread filled my nostrils. The sound of sirens was distant but approaching. I could still feel the warmth of his touch, the echo of his voice in my soul. I had been given a second chance. And I knew, without a doubt, that my life would never be the same again. Jesus told me that it wasn't my time yet, but there was something I needed to see. Something that would change the world forever. He lifted his hand, and a vision unfolded before me, a glimpse into the future, a moment in time that had not yet come but was rapidly approaching. I saw cities bustling with life. People going about their daily routines, laughing with their families, shopping, working. But beneath the surface, something was wrong. There was a heavy tension in the air, a quiet shift that most people didn't notice. It was as if an unseen force was at work, weaving its way through society, setting the stage for something unprecedented. Then, I saw world leaders making announcements. Large screens in major cities displayed their faces as they introduced a new global system, one designed to bring safety, stability, and convenience. It was the ultimate solution to economic crises, health concerns, and security threats. The world was desperate for order, and they offered it in the form of an advanced implant, a small, nearly invisible chip embedded under the skin. At first, it seemed harmless. It replaced ID cards, credit cards, and even medical records. No more lost wallets. No more identity theft. No more waiting in hospital lines. Everything was accessible with a simple wave of the hand. The technology promised efficiency, security, and a better quality of life. People eagerly accepted it. Governments incentivized it, businesses adopted it, and even religious leaders endorsed it. Pastors in churches encouraged their congregations to embrace this blessing from God. They called it progress, a sign of a more connected and unified world. But I saw what they couldn't see. As people received the implant, a darkness settled over them. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, but in the spiritual realm, it was clear. Their prayers became mechanical. Their eyes lost their light. Their connection to God weakened. They didn't realize it, but something within them was shifting, changing. Their souls were being marked. I turned to Jesus, my heart pounding. "What is this?" I asked. He looked at me, his expression filled with sorrow. "The mark of the beast," he said. "It will not come through force. It will come through convenience." A wave of understanding washed over me. This was how it would happen. Not with violence, not with coercion, but with a promise of a better life. The world would not resist it, they would welcome it. They would celebrate it. And they would have no idea what they were truly giving up. Then, I saw what came next. A divide formed. There were those who accepted the mark, seamlessly integrating into the new system. They were given access to everything, the ability to buy, to sell, to work, to travel. Without it, life became nearly impossible. And then there were those who refused. I saw them hiding, running, struggling to survive. They were shut out of society, cast aside as radicals, conspiracy theorists, and enemies of progress. They lost their homes, their jobs, their ability to function in the world. They were hunted, silenced, erased. Yet, despite the suffering, their faith burned brighter than ever. Their prayers were powerful. Their eyes shone with divine light. They had nothing in the eyes of the world, but in the spiritual realm, they had everything. Jesus turned to me once more. "Warn them," he said. "Tell them what you have seen. Let those who have ears to hear, hear." The vision faded, and I found myself gasping as I returned to my body. The weight of what I had seen pressed down on me like an unbearable burden. The world was heading toward this moment, faster than anyone realized. And now, I carried the responsibility of sharing this warning, hoping that at least some would listen before it was too late. As the vision continued, I saw how the implant became a requirement. Slowly but surely, society built itself around it. Stores stopped accepting cash or credit cards, only the implant. Schools required it for enrollment. Hospitals refused patients who didn't have it. Jobs became inaccessible without it. Those who refused were treated as outcasts, unable to participate in the very world they once belonged to. At first, people had a choice. But eventually, it was no longer an option, it was a necessity. Those who resisted faced hardships. They couldn't buy food, travel, or receive medical care. They were labeled as dangers to society, accused of spreading misinformation and resisting progress. Some were even arrested. Families were torn apart, parents took the implant while their children refused, or vice versa. The world viewed them as rebels, standing in the way of unity and peace. And yet, despite their struggles, I saw light in their eyes. Those who refused the implant, the ones who clung to Jesus, were the only ones who were truly free. Jesus turned to me and said, "My people will hear my voice and know the truth. But many are not prepared." Tears welled up in my eyes as I watched the suffering of those who remained faithful. They hid in forests, in abandoned buildings, in the shadows of the world that had turned against them. They had nothing, no homes, no security, no guarantees of safety. But they had something greater. Their faith was unshaken. Their prayers were powerful. The presence of God surrounded them in ways the world could not understand. And then I looked at those who had accepted the implant. On the surface, their lives looked comfortable. They had access to everything, food, shelter, work, entertainment. They moved freely, participated in society, and were praised for their compliance. But in the spiritual realm, they were bound. Shackled by something unseen. Their souls carried an emptiness, a void they could not explain. Their prayers, once vibrant, had become hollow. Their connection to God had faded. Many of them didn't even realize what had happened. I turned to Jesus, my heart heavy with sorrow. "Can they be saved?" I asked. His expression was solemn. "Some will realize the truth and repent. But for many, the deception will be too great. They will not seek me, because they will believe they no longer need me." I wanted to cry out, to warn them, to make them see. But the vision was fading. The world I had just witnessed blurred into light, and suddenly, I was back, gasping for air, lying on my kitchen floor. The smell of burnt garlic bread filled my nostrils. My phone was still buzzing on the counter. I was home. But my heart knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I had seen the future. And now, I had a responsibility to warn those who would listen. Then, I saw something incredible. A group of believers gathered in secret. They had no implants, no access to the system, but they lacked nothing. Food was miraculously provided, manna appearing on the ground like in the days of old, jars of water never running dry, fruit-bearing trees growing in desolate places. The sick were healed through prayer alone. Blind eyes opened, the lame walked, diseases vanished in an instant. Angels surrounded them, protecting them from harm. Soldiers passed by their hiding places without seeing them. Cameras and tracking devices malfunctioned when trying to detect them. It was as if an unseen hand shielded them from the eyes of the world. They had no technology, no security, no earthly comforts, but they had something far greater, the presence of God. I saw children laughing, families praying together, a light shining so brightly within them that it pushed back the darkness around them. Though they had been cast out of society, they were not broken. Though they faced hunger, their bodies were sustained. Though they were hunted, their hearts remained fearless. I turned to Jesus, overwhelmed by the sight. "How is this possible?" I asked. He smiled, his eyes filled with deep love. "Because I am with them," he said. "I have always been with my people. When the world rejects them, I draw them closer. When the world starves them, I provide. When the world seeks to destroy them, I protect. They are my remnant, and my power will be made perfect in their weakness." I looked again, and I saw miracles beyond anything I had ever imagined. Waters parted before those who needed to cross. Fires could not burn them. Storms obeyed their prayers. Wild animals became tame in their presence. Their very footsteps were guided, keeping them one step ahead of those who pursued them. But then, I saw something else, a different kind of light, one that seemed beautiful and inviting but carried an unsettling feeling. A city glowed with artificial brilliance, neon signs flashing with messages of peace, unity, and progress. The world had accepted the implant, and they had built a new society around it. There was no poverty, no crime, no hunger, but there was also no freedom. People walked in perfect obedience to the system, but their eyes were empty. Their joy was hollow. Their laughter was forced. It was a counterfeit light, a world where everything looked perfect on the surface, yet something vital was missing, the presence of God. Jesus looked at me and said, "The enemy will create a counterfeit light. But my light will overcome it." I watched as a great divide formed between the two groups. On one side, those who had chosen the world's security, comfort, and order, unknowingly giving up their very souls. On the other, those who had nothing in the eyes of the world, yet had everything in the eyes of heaven. The contrast was undeniable. One group lived in a world of artificial perfection but suffered in their spirits. The other group had no place in society but carried a supernatural joy, peace, and strength that could not be explained by human means. And then, Jesus spoke again. Tell them. Tell my people not to fear. The days ahead will be dark, but my light will shine brighter. Many will be deceived, but those who seek me will find the truth. Those who trust in me will see miracles. And those who endure to the end will be saved. The vision faded. I was back in my home, my heart pounding. I knew what I had seen was real. And I knew that I had been given a mission. To warn. To prepare. To encourage those who would listen. For the time was near. The vision ended, and I found myself back in my body, gasping for air as paramedics surrounded me. The beeping of medical monitors filled my ears, the worried voices of the emergency workers blending into the background. But I was no longer the same. The weight of what I had seen was crushing, yet my heart burned with purpose. I had been sent back for a reason. I knew what I had to do. March 21st, 2025, is coming. And with it, a decision that will determine the fate of many. The world will be presented with something that appears good, beneficial, and logical. It will be praised as the solution to all our problems, a path to safety, order, and prosperity. World leaders, influential figures, and even religious authorities will endorse it, calling it the next step for humanity. The media will celebrate it. Society will welcome it. But beneath the surface lies a cost far greater than anyone can imagine, the loss of free will, the severing of connection with God. This is not about fear. It is about truth. I saw how the deception will unfold. It will not come in the form of force, at least not at first. It will be subtle, persuasive, and wrapped in the language of progress. People will accept it willingly, believing they are stepping into a brighter future. The enemy's greatest weapon is deception. He will make the chains look like freedom, the darkness look like light. He will promise peace, but it will be false peace. He will promise security, but it will come at the cost of your soul. And the worst part? Many will not even realize what they have lost. I saw churches divided, some standing firm in the truth, while others compromised, preaching acceptance of this new system. Many who once called themselves believers will justify their choice, convincing themselves that God would not ask them to suffer. That He would understand. That He would not expect them to lose everything for the sake of faith. But those who know Jesus, who truly know Him, will not be deceived. I saw them standing strong, unwavering in their faith. They were not afraid, even when the world turned against them. They understood that the kingdom of God is not of this world, and they refused to trade eternity for temporary comfort. Jesus had shown me what was coming, and He had sent me back to share this warning. To tell you to prepare. To tell you to stay close to Jesus. To tell you to listen for His voice. Because soon, everything will change. And when the time comes, when the world presents this choice, do not be deceived. You must decide now where you stand. Not when the pressure is at its peak. Not when the world is demanding your compliance. But now. Because only those who stand firm in their faith will remain free.